Yeah, in fact, during one of my novels, A Taste of Love, which is the third one in my romance, which, by the way, they can be read in any order. They're all self-contained stories. But during that, there was one chapter I can think of specifically that I was just having a hard time finding the right words to convey the tone I wanted. And then I realized I'm listening to the wrong song. And so I changed to a different song and it just came spilling out.
So hi, Kyle. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you doing, Deb?
Pretty good. I have to admit, before we start, I'm going to feel weird calling you Kyle sometimes because my husband is also Kyle.
But that's not a bad thing. Somebody told me once, it's probably not true, but somebody told me once, Kyle means handsome. So that means you married a handsome guy, right?
I should tell him that and he'll be like, yes, 100% I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's probably how the rumor spread. It's false, yeah. I'm sure.
False advertising. So why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Kyle Shoop, Shoop, and I write two different series. The first one is called the Asa Bishop Trilogy. It's a middle grade fantasy action series. A lot of people that have read it have said, my kids like Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, they love that. That's a trilogy. And then I also write, now the current series that I'm writing in is romance. It's what's called clean, sweet, wholesome romance. And it's called the Senses of Love series. So I've written right now 7 novels. I'm finishing up the 8th one, which will probably be out right around when this podcast comes out. So.
Awesome. I have questions suddenly before we actually jump into the questions I have. Sure. I was recently talking to people about middle grade fiction and how hard it is for an adult to write it. Did you find that you had problems putting yourself back into like the 12, 13-year-old experience?
I didn't. I never really thought of it that way. And maybe that says I'm less mature than maybe I would expect. Although, you know, as I kept writing it, it became obvious that I needed to kind of keep that in perspective as I would write with, you know, how would a 12-year-old approach conflict would be different than an adult, you know?
Right.
But yeah, no, I just enjoyed it. And actually, interestingly enough, when I switched to writing my romance series, the first book is called The Sound of Love. And it's about these two characters that meet up later in life. And throughout the book, there's flashbacks to when they knew each other as kids. They were childhood friends.
So you had like a little bit of middle grade in there a little bit.
Yes, I loved being able to write those flashback chapters because I'm like, oh, this is so refreshing to be able to write from that child perspective again and bring out that side of me, I guess. It was actually kind of a nice bridge from writing middle grade to adult stuff.
Nice. It sounds like that worked out. Yeah, we just had been talking that we had both tried it and we both read it afterwards and like, we don't sound anything like kids. Like it didn't come off as something that we thought a kid would read. So yeah, kudos to you as an adult. I mean, kudos to anybody as an adult writing that.
Totally.
I imagine it must have been hard to do.
Just don't use any words that have like more than 6 letters. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, now you're offending my 12-year-old self.
Wait, hey, that was easy for me. I don't know if I could think of one longer than 6 letters. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah.
So how much of yourself or your experiences do you put into your books in general?
I actually try not to, with the exception of one book. So currently I've written 7, almost 8.
Right.
And so there's one book in there that has quite a bit of, I wouldn't say me, but kind of like inspired by some personal experiences of mine. And that's called The Sight of Love. But other than that, I try not to because I write music as well. That tends to be more autobiographical.
Right.
Whereas with writing novels, I want to escape.
Okay, I
And
could
so,
see
I
that.
mean, nobody can, I don't know about you and you're writing, but nobody, I mean, you obviously can't ever really escape your experience and your lens on
Mm-hmm.
life, but you can try and do that. So I can think of just a handful of things from my novels, which have been like, oh, boom, that's from
Right.
my
You can draw a
experience.
direct correlation from like something somebody says to something that you did or you heard or at some point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so great question. How about you? What do you do?
I don't know. I kind of want to say 100%, just because I don't know. You know, like you can't write unless it is from experience, like the way coffee
Yeah,
smells or something like that. I mean, you have those little things. So maybe on one end it is 100%, but also like there's very little that is, like you said, like a direct correlation. My first book was heavily inspired by the place my grandparents lived, but other than that, I mean, there is no direct, like, my aunt said this, the character in the book said that. I mean, there isn't any of
yeah,
that. But
yeah.
again, all those little tiny things, like the way concrete smells when it rains, stuff like that. But,
And the way, and the more and more you talk about, I think what you just said describes it perfectly for me too. Like it kind of gives the framework.
mm-hmm,
My experience gives the framework of the setting and
mm-hmm,
whatnot, but the characters are not me, you
right.
know?
Yes.
Um, yeah. And could you imagine if it was like, I don't know, for me, if I was writing me and what happened, if
Mm-hmm.
my family had read it and they're like, now wait a minute, this,
Is that how you felt during this?
yeah, just we need to
Right.
talk, so no, I write to escape. I love escaping to these made up situations and
Mm-hmm.
scenes and worlds. So if they resemble too much my experience, then
Then it doesn't escape anymore. It's just reliving.
yeah,
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 I can see that. So, what kind of research do you do for your books slash series? And how, I don't know, how,
yeah.
like, what kind of research do you do to make it like real?
That's been all over the board. And so
I
if you
expected that kind
indulge
of
me
question.
to, yeah, let me kind of give some context. So the first three books that I ever wrote is that Ace of Bishop
Mm-hmm.
trilogy. And those are taking real world things and making a fantasy novel about them. So the first
Mm-hmm.
one's Asa in the Animal Kingdom. So there are animals that are real characters through magic and spells and whatnot. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to do a ton of research into the way a tarantula hunts and kills to be able to fit that into my book. And I
Watch
got
a
to tell
lot
you,
of YouTube.
oh my gosh, that was so many tarantula videos. I,
It would be nightmares for months for me.
yes, I both respect them and now just like fear them even more with watching that. But then, like the second one was Asa and the Seven Ancient Wonders, and I knew very little about it, but I knew that's the world I want to create. So I both that one and then the one after, which is Asa and the Adventure Through Time, which
Mm-hmm.
involves time traveling through real events in human history. That actually I took quite a bit more time than normal, about a year for each novel, kind of
Mm-hmm.
laying the framework of where I wanted the story to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and before I actually started writing. So quite a bit for that first series. My my romance series, not as much, with the exception of the book I'm writing right now. It's called The Touch of Love, and it's a World War II set romance love story.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of research on World War II because I really wanted to feel like it's
Feel.
something that could have
Mm-hmm.
happened, you
Right.
know. Um, but other than that, the other romance, it's just stories that inspire me. So it's been all over the board.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
yeah,
I wanted to talk first about that middle grade fantasy series, about the Ace series.
yeah,
What was your world creation process you went through to come up with this universe?
yeah. I think the way typically it works for me is
Mm-hmm.
when I'm halfway through the book I'm writing, I start to have the idea for the next book. So I
Okay.
say that because as I started writing the first book, halfway through, I realized this is a much larger story. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to keep that in mind while also trying to create a, a close-ended story in the first book, you know?
Okay. So you're
Um,
both trying to make an open-ended structure and close it up so the first book actually had a resolution.
exactly. And in that first series, the Aces series, I made a conscious decision to write in first person.
Okay.
Um, because there was a lot of, this 12-year-old boy wakes up in a place he doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of mystery there that I wanted to build from that 12-year-old's perspective.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
I
makes sense.
in me as he's discovering stuff. And so that's how I did it for that first one. But if I'm being honest, the whole thing started with a dream,
Okay.
which I hear
You're gonna
more
go a
and
little
more.
Stephanie Meyer on me?
I might, she, yeah, it was a dream, which kind of set the stage for the opening scene.
Okay.
Um,
What was your
so,
dream about? Like, how did it inspire this?
okay, so remember, it is a fantasy book, okay?
Uh-huh.
And the dream was I woke up on a hard red brick floor,
Mm-hmm.
and around me there were six doors in this room,
Mm-hmm.
which I later described in my book as being the throne room. Okay.
Okay.
But my light just turned off. Hold on a sec. And okay, so I wake up on a cold red brick floor,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in a six-sided room, and there's a door in each room, and one says exit. So I run and I try to open it, and it's sealed shut. And so I look at the other five doors, and this was my dream. On each of them was written a word. One
Okay.
was, and those words were aquarium, terrarium, safari, jungle, and aviary. Right? That was my
Okay.
dream.
I'm surprised you remember
And
this much detail from it.
well, it's the first couple chapters of my book. Is that's
Uh-huh.
what happens to Asa when he wakes up? Is that he's been taken this magical kingdom, and that stuck with me. I remember it was over a Thanksgiving, and I woke up, and I remember being at my in-laws and just drawing the map of this and being like, "Oh my gosh, this was the dream I just had."
Mm-hmm.
And instead of finding purpose for it, I was like, I need to make something of this,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and it's like I woke up in the middle of a zoo, which I guess being at my in-laws
At
there's a
Thanksgiving sounds like
metaphor,
it would be a bit of a
but
zoo.
no disrespect to them, but kind of just
Right.
interesting that I would have that dream. But yeah, so it's kind of that's how the world started. And then as I went deeper and deeper, and I built the backstory of Asa and why he specifically was brought to that kingdom and made
Mm-hmm.
it personal for him, then what happens when he opens the exit door. I don't want to give too much away, but that's where you would think the story would go, right?
Right.
And so what's behind that exit door? And that's what I love asking my readers is if he was to have opened that exit door, what do you think would be behind there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the next world. And it just builds until there's a huge conflict between wizards and sorcerers, and so that's world building for my first one. But it really does start, at least for me, with and I made this decision with the romance series too of do I want to write from first person, or what perspective do you want to write from and
Right.
why?
That is
Really
very
important.
important. It sets the tone for the whole book.
Exactly. Yeah. So
So what would you say is the heart of that series? Like what makes that series alive?
if we're talking the Aces series, it's
Mm-hmm.
him trying to reunite with his family, and he's fighting for his family. And what that means varies with each book as the stakes
Right.
get higher and higher. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, which I gotta say is so cool because I've read that now to my two of my three kids,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just the coolest feeling, you know. How old are you? How old are you?
They're 4 and 5.
Okay, you'll get there. It's so
Yeah,
cool.
I do tell them stories based on like short stories or bits that I've
Yeah,
written, and it is really like, wow, they like this thing that I made up. It's a bit of an ego boost. But it is
yeah,
very cool to see like my oldest is at the point where she's very mimicky. So she starts writing, scribbly stories that aren't actually words yet because she can't write that many words yet. But then she like continues the story that I told her at night.
and isn't that so cool that like on this? Do you make them up on the spot?
I usually start out with an idea that I've had percolating or that I had previously
Okay,
written out, but then I do just kind of wander sometimes. I just kind of make it up.
it's kind of a fun exercise to be
It
because I
is.
do that with my kids too.
It's a really
Yeah,
good creativity, just like brain refresh kind of. It's like a
yeah,
palate cleanser.
yeah. It's like you have a captive audience in your
Mm-hmm.
kids that at bedtime they want a story, and it's like you have a sparking idea, and on the spot you got to make that into something.
Yep.
I do that with my kids too. It is the coolest thing. It
Mm-hmm.
is the coolest. Yeah.
It is really nice, like especially if you're experiencing something like writer's block or something. It is
Mhm.
really nice to do something like that where it's just kind of rambles and you just decide on the spot which path it's going to take.
Yes, absolutely. And do you know what I like to do though
Hmm.
with my kids is if they did something like naughty that day or week, then I build that into the story and
Yeah.
I show the punishment that happens to that. No, I'm just kidding. They're like, oh, wait a minute. You mean that could have wearing a bike without my helmet could have what? No.
I don't know. I actually think
They don't
maybe not
listen to
right
me as
before
a parent.
bedtime, but yeah.
They won't listen to me as a parent unless it's in a story and then they understand.
They don't listen to me as a parent unless I tell my husband to tell them that and then they listen.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Well, we're in the situation where mom is the authoritative one because mom is the one that's home with them the most and makes the
Yeah.
rules, and dad's the fun guy. He gets to come home and play with them. So it doesn't mean anything unless dad is saying it.
Yep. Yep. I know
It just
exactly what you mean. My
it
wife and
just
I have
tuned me
said the
out.
same thing. Yep. Yep. I don't have an answer to that because my
I
wife
know.
and I go
Yeah.
through the same thing. And I like being the fun one, so I
I
really don't have an
Yeah,
answer for
exactly. It's great for you. You get to be the fun one. You're not the one that's saying no, you can't have that candy for a snack or something.
that. Yeah.
That's
Sometimes I do find myself putting my foot down with my kids, but mainly when my wife's in the room so that she thinks, oh, okay, Kyle does that too. Okay, hey, there you go, evening things. But it's all just an act. No.
hmm Um, that's one of the reasons we're getting off topic here, but it's one of the reasons why I
Totally.
like sending them to school.
Yeah,
It's just I found like for example, we went camping this summer, and this
yeah.
was like more like glamping camping, like they had a swimming pool and like an ice cream shack and stuff. Excuse me, and one of the lifeguards yelled at my oldest for going down the slide while another kid was at the bottom of the slide in the pool. And man, did she learn that lesson so well that I kind of apply the same concept to school that I like sending them to school because it's another adult telling them things and they'll actually listen to that adult.
Yeah. Well, and if I could, we were talking before we started recording
Mm-hmm.
about how well you use your time too. Once they're at school, that's just really impressive, Deb. That you're like, they're gone. I got so long to ride
I've
or
got
do
2 hours and
whatever.
15 minutes. I have to use every minute wisely.
That's really impressive. That's really because I would probably find myself vegging for a certain period of time, and at first being like, okay, two hours, okay,
hmm
an hour, okay, half an hour. I'll use this half an hour to write. I don't know.
Well, I actually, in order to stop myself from doing that sometimes,
Yeah.
I've started two Twitch channels. I've started one for myself and one for the
Oh,
podcast. So I stream those. So I'm held accountable on a schedule that at least Monday through Thursday, Fridays, I'm not quite as like strict about it, but at least Monday through Thursday, I'm writing for an audience. Like it is there in posterity.
oh, that's a great idea.
It
That's a
definitely holds me
safeguard.
accountable.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Huh. Oh, wait. So so it's not just for your podcast, but you're actually writing
I'm
live
writing
too?
during that.
Wow.
I am basically streaming my writing session with music, and I've got the
Interesting.
microphone on, and you can hear the dogs randomly bark at the mailman or something.
That is such a new, fascinating concept to me. I don't even know what questions to ask on that. And it's almost kind of a terrifying thought too, because like
Mm-hmm.
somebody watching your creativity
Yeah.
in real time. Wow.
It is
Interesting.
sometimes. I did one episode where I was talking while I was writing, and that did not work out very well because I
Yeah, that'd
found
be
I ramble like crazy. I started talking about how much I love rosemary toast. I mean, it was really bad. I made sure it got deleted. It's
And
not there anymore.
I was gonna say, how do I watch that one?
That one doesn't exist anymore. Thank God Twitch has like a 2 week purge session, so that doesn't exist anymore. But I turned the microphone on so you can hear the keyboard clicks, and I have like jazz or lo-fi music on in the background. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do it, and if anybody tunes in, they can actually see me creating what I'm currently working on.
Well, and actually, what you just said leads into something we've been talking about before too. When I mean, on the topic of world building,
Mm-hmm.
we both use music
Yes.
to get us in that frame of mind, or what is it for you specifically that you look for when you put music on?
It depends on the scene I'm writing. Um,
Yeah.
it depends on the overall, I guess, emotion of the scene. If it's action, I'm gonna look for action music, fast paced. I generally like scores, orchestra pieces. For that kind of writing, like a heavy emotion writing, like
Okay.
really melancholy, really action packed, something like that, really angry. I like orchestral music for that, and I have a couple artists on YouTube that I follow that do some like brilliant. They already put it together in a playlist for me, so I'm like, okay, let's use that one, and
Have
then
you
work from
always
there.
been that way, or did you find that as a tool later as you wrote more and more?
I don't think I was always this way because back when I first started writing, like 14 years old, I don't remember
Sure.
using music that way.
Okay.
But I've been doing this for a long time that I can't remember when I started.
Oh, okay. Good point. Yeah, I make playlists actually for each
Mm-hmm.
book. I probably have driven up the listen count for certain songs for artists like
Because you listen to them over
exponentially.
and over and over
The
again.
same song on repeat for
Mm-hmm.
certain chapters.
Yep.
And
I've
I had, yeah.
I have definitely done that for Ursine Volpine's Wicked Game. That is like the
Huh,
theme to the last novel I wrote, and I listened to that man over and over and over again. But I don't go so far as to make playlists, so kudos to
yeah.
you. I'm too impatient for that.
Well, it's almost like something I can look back on and think, oh, okay, while I was writing this novel,
Mm-hmm.
and I only started this with the romance novels, by the way.
Uh-huh.
As I'm writing this novel, what songs were I listening to? It was just really interesting to look back and see those songs,
Yeah, I could see
and,
that.
and ones that have carried over from one novel to the next. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of
Now, so you're
interesting.
not making the playlist to write to, you're like organically adding
No.
songs as you're listening
Oh
to them to
yeah.
the playlist?
Yeah. In fact, during one of my novels, A Taste of Love, which is the third one in my romance,
Mm-hmm.
which by the way, they can be read in any order. They're all self-contained
Right.
stories. But during that, there was one chapter I can think of specifically that I was just having a hard time finding the right words to convey the tone I wanted. And then I
Uh-huh.
realized I'm listening to the wrong song. And
That
so
has
I
happened.
changed to a different song and it just came spilling out. Like I was like, that's all I needed. And so I was so happy that I decided to make that, yeah, organic playlist as we go. But it's interesting how, oh, and then I was telling you too, before that, I will even watch scenes of some shows,
Mm-hmm.
or movies or whatnot to get
Uh,
myself in that mood. you
Right.
know.
I'm very curious about that. Like what scenes or shows do you watch for specific do you have any you watch kind of like on repeat or whatever strikes your fancy at the time?
It's kind of whatever pops in my head. A couple that, okay, so this is where it gets embarrassing a little bit, I suppose, right? But sure.
It's a podcast. It's
Um,
like a barrel kind of deal.
right. I mean, I do write, romance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to find myself, even if it's not a huge emotional scene, of finally the two characters are, you know, kissing or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
I still know I want to get there eventually. And so, there's the casino night scene from, The Office.
Okay.
That's one where Jim bears his, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be more than friends. That's not enough. That scene
Mm-hmm.
outside. I mean, of course, there's the Notebook scene. I mean,
Right. The very, very
with the
classic.
I wrote you every day, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And just other scenes like that, because that's kind of when it comes to my romance scene, I do compare it to like the Nicholas Sparks. So I find myself motivated by those type of scenes, which I've gone from book to
Mm-hmm.
screen.
Right.
So
I can I can get behind that. I mean, I don't do that personally, but I definitely as I'm writing it I can't write it until I can see it in my head like it is like a movie or a show. Like
yeah.
it doesn't come out right until I can like just see that entire environment, see the whole thing as it lays out.
Okay. So next question for you then. Are there even though so you kind of started with the question of how personal is your writing,
Mm-hmm.
right? How
Right.
much do you put yourself in there? Even though the book may be completely different than scenes from your life,
Mm-hmm.
if you need to write something that's tragic, is there a scene from your life, which you would think of, or if there's something inspiring or adventurous, is there a common scene that you will think of that will help you get there? Even if it may not be a YouTube movie or whatever, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, can you go somewhere in your mind, kind of like if you were an actor having to act a scene out, they say,
Mm-hmm.
think of something that somewhere you can go to in your mind. Do you find yourself doing that?
Um, sort of, but not quite like that. I don't know. I guess like any writer, I have a very active imagination, so I
Yeah.
don't go to my life to pull pieces out of this, to put pieces into the scene like that. But when I'm dealing with the emotion for the characters, I can, I guess put myself in their place and try to think about what they're feeling and then make myself feel the emotion and then I can write it. Does that make sense?
Hmm. It absolutely does. Yeah. And I do something similar with some scenes too. Yeah. It's interesting to hear another writer talk about
Right.
this and you think, maybe I'm not as crazy as I always thought I was.
That's the whole point of this podcast is writers talking to basically other writers or
Yeah.
industry people. It's like peerage. You're just talking to your peers and it's nice sometimes just to like, hey, I identify with that. Like
Right.
that's the reason I started this podcast.
Absolutely. Because when I'm in the middle of a scene, I won't then like go to YouTube, like
Hmm.
especially if it's something that needs to evoke certain feelings.
Hmm.
There are those memories in my life that stirred up the emotion.
Hmm.
And you tap into that emotion, even if you're not replicating the scene in my life in the
Right.
book, like the emotion you want to replicate,
Hmm. Yeah,
right?
like make yourself feel it and then it comes out on the page as natural. Like it doesn't feel stilted or something like
Yeah.
that. Like you
Okay.
need that human emotion behind it to make the reader actually connect with the character.
So let's go in a deep dive, Deb.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Here's the real question for you.
Okay.
Can you give a concrete example? Even if we've never read a scene of your book, can you give an example of a scene in your book and a moment in your life that you've tapped into?
Hmm.
If you're willing. It's kind of a
It is hard because
revealing question.
yeah, well, tell you what, I'll take one that I was just doing today.
Okay.
Um So I have this chapter. I'm rewriting the end of my last book. Like I don't know what they're doing today. Like 24, chapter 24 out of 30. Like just total rewrite. Just didn't work. And the character, his main character is named Tad, and he. It's very complicated because he wakes up in this alternate reality that's sort of like hell, but not really. Um, but his companion Henry has just been eaten basically by a shadow demon monster. So he
Okay.
wakes up in this chapter. Henry's gone, and there's somebody new with him. He doesn't know. He doesn't know who they are, and but Tad has a job to do. Tad has to. It's very important that Tad close this door, or basically the whole world's gonna go to shit. So Tad has to deal with the fact that his friend was basically just eaten, but he has a job to do, and he can't take time to grieve.
Hmm.
So
So
the
how do you
way
tap into that? Yeah.
Well, the way I was thinking about it was my grandpa's death when my grandpa died.
Mm.
It was this is really overwhelming right now. I can't really deal with this because we have to plan the funeral.
Yeah.
This is really terrible. I hate that this happened, but there is a job to do, and I'll think about it later. Kind of the Scarlet O'Hara. I'll work on it tomorrow, whatever she said.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Oh, thank you. It was this
Yeah.
morning, so it's fresh in my mind.
Well, and it's making, I don't know how to put this, but from an outsider's perspective, not at all being
Hmm.
connected to your grandpa's death, like you're finding a way not to cope, but to make something
Procrastinate.
of, I was going to say, make something of that moment in your life
Uh-huh.
have more value than, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's cool. And there's beauty in that, I think, making, I don't know, finding value in that moment of loss
Uh-huh.
for you personally beyond just recognizing who he was,
Mm-hmm.
giving value for your creativity too.
Okay. Well, I guess thank you. Uh, how about same question right back at you?
Mine's not going to be that different. I can just
Okay.
tell you. Yeah. It's, whenever I think of a, a moment of loss, and I'm not just talking a character dying,
Mm-hmm.
but, go back to like, in The Sound of Love, my book, The Sound of Love, I have, um, the two main characters, Charlotte and John, again, they were best childhood friends
Mm-hmm.
that got ripped apart. They were each other's safety net in an orphanage and
Okay.
all they knew and could rely on, right? And that got ripped apart from them. And that's part of the book. But any moment of loss like that, whether it's character dying or not, I do find myself recognizing those moments of loss in my life from really when my dad passed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that I write to cope with that. That's not at all
Mm-hmm.
true. But it's something that I've felt the emotion of what it is to lose someone, and
Right.
that's what you tap into,
You can
And
understand it so you can write it down better so somebody else can understand it
yeah.
and relate.
And what's interesting is for me personally is I've kind of used that experience now in 5 books for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it allows me to gain new perspective on that loss and
I
how
could
to
see that.
what I've grown from it or how to honor it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
It gives you a new perspective every time you revisit it, probably
Yeah, yeah.
with the
It's
current
not
state
just
of life.
it's not just tapping into sadness for sadness sake.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's finding beauty in that loss somehow, which is the current one I'm writing right now, actually. Um, so yeah.
Okay. What's been the hardest scene that you've had to write so far? The one that was the most difficult for you?
Whew.
I only ask the hard questions.
Um, my hardest scenes are typically the emotionally difficult scenes.
Okay.
And I say that because also I've written now. So like the end of my ASA series, I mean, it had to wrap up a 3-book long story. So there was a
Right.
lot of like
A lot of
characters being in
pressure.
place, and it makes sense for all the different characters and the conflict. Yeah, that's tough, but that's nowhere near as tough as the emotionally charged chapters. And I guess maybe the conversation would make it sound like I write a lot of heavy, tough stuff. That's not the
Right.
case at all. But in terms of the hardest chapter, I think it would be um, in book 2 of my romance. It's called The Sight of Love. And in it, my main character finds out that he is blind, and he finds that out, or he's losing his eyesight.
Okay.
And he finds that out at the moment that his first son is born, and he can't make out the detail in his son.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Right? And
It's
so
cruel
he goes
to do that. I'm mad at you a little bit for doing that.
And so he's in the hospital, and he, quickly escapes to find out for himself, what's going on with his eyesight, and he's quickly diagnosed. And that was really tough for me. And if you'll remember, when he asked me, do I write anything personal? And my answer was generally no, except for one book, The Side of Love, and that's this one. Because my dad did lose his eyesight as I was growing up. So there's that emotional connection, which made that very difficult. But it's its own story. The character is not my dad in there.
Right.
But still, I think it goes into what we talked about before about finding a moment to tap into.
Just putting bits of your own experiences in there to make it believable, I guess. It sounds like a bad word to use, but that's the only one I can come up with right now.
No, it's yeah. Yep, absolutely.
To get a connection with a reader, so it doesn't sound fake and contrived. So you need that connection.
But I want people to know I write happy stuff and funny stuff too. It's not just all heavy.
Well, yeah, you write you were talking about your how you were defining your romances, and I was mentally thinking it's like the cozy mystery of romances. It's like the cozy romance.
Yeah, totally. And I had the idea. So there's 5 books in my romance series, and I'm writing the last one right now. Where so it's called the Senses of Love series for a reason, because each book is a different love story focused on one of the 5 human senses. Right. And the idea there is we all experience or express love differently. Some people, they're more visual, others,
right.
It different ways.
It reminds me of the old the love language theory.
Yeah. So I found a quote once that I just loved. It was essentially, "Love is the symphony of the senses."
That is nice.
That just stuck
That's
out.
a nice unifying theme.
Yeah. So anyway.
So about your Sense of Love series, I was curious when you were talking about them. Are they part of like a unified universe, or are they each their own little separate one?
Yeah, thanks. I will spoil a little bit. The book I'm writing right now has taken me longer than any of the books in the series. So the answer is yes to both of those. Okay. Because each book stands on its own.
Right.
But the main characters in some books are background characters in other books as their stories. Fun. And that plays out in the one I'm finishing writing right now, where those worlds intersect even larger. And the idea behind it to me was that, our paths cross with each other. And sometimes it's just for the briefest of moments. But those interactions mean something, and we have a lasting effect on each other, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 years, Right. But yeah, they're all independent stories. You don't need to have read them in order or anything. But the last one, The Touch of Love, it's a shared world that comes together. Kind of like, I don't know if you ever watched the first season of Modern Love on Amazon Prime. There were all
Modern
these
Love.
different love stories.
Oh, it's on my watch list, but I haven't watched it
Yeah,
yet. I keep meaning
it's
to.
really good. It is really good. And and I'm watching it. I'm like, that's exactly what I'm doing. Kind of. I mean, different
Right.
way. They're different
Mm-hmm.
stories, obviously, but like,
But they're all like in New York City or something like that, right?
yeah,
So they
yeah.
have the potential to cross paths here and there.
And you see some of them in the last episode, right? As they
Mm-hmm.
all form a community
Right.
and they're living in some community. Mine was more difficult because my characters I intentionally placed all over the US.
Okay.
So
And
like
some
the
in the
one I'm writing
past.
right now. Yeah, yeah. And so it was tough to how to get those to all merge and
Right.
intersect, right? So yeah. But I think I'll pull it off, I hope. So
It sounds like an interesting concept. Like I always like things like movies that do that, and I've read
yeah.
other stories that do like those little Easter eggs sometimes, little Easter egg things sometimes where like here's the main character from the last part of the series, some stuff like that. I see it a lot I do I do cozy mystery reading, which is why I
Yeah.
brought that up. But you see that every now and then in sometimes those series, and it's always fun to do.
It's tough to do, but I think so. My wife will read these as I go, and
Mhm.
she heard what I was going to do before I'm writing this last book, and she's like, "Okay, good luck with that." And then as I'm getting closer to the end, she's like, "Oh my gosh, this worked out so well." So she's a critic too.
Mhm.
So she's not just "Oh, good job, honey," or whatever. Like
Right.
she's a critic. So if I can
Hey, it's good
impress
you have
her,
that in your life. Like you have that
I
first dedicated reader.
yeah, I'm lucky I have her in my life for more reasons than that. But for sure. Although I'll kind of spill one way I did it is so in the first book, The Sound of
Mhm.
Love, John, he is a singer songwriter.
Mhm.
Okay, and he goes from playing on a street corner to
Mhm.
wanting to make it big. And so in just an example of how I do it is like in the next book, the characters will have the music on in the background and it, influence, oh, I recognize that, song and it's a love song and it's John's song from the
Oh,
first
that's
book.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way I do that is so with The Sound of Love, so I write and record music too. And in the
Mhm.
ebook, I did hyperlinks. So to the songs John wrote and sing are actually
Right.
me. I recorded them.
Uh-huh.
And so the reader can actually click on it and listen to it on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, listen
That's
to John's
nice.
actual songs
Right. And then listen
instead
to
of
it
just reading the
again in the
lyrics.
second one.
Yeah. It's kind of
That's nice.
I was like, that's one way to intersect these worlds.
Mhm.
So
And I'm thinking as you're saying that, that's also very clever of you. You don't have to worry about copyright issues.
it's all me. I mean, down to the person that's playing the drums in the songs, even though I
Mhm.
don't play the drums, like it's
Right.
me. I had to figure out how to play the drums to record it. Everything on these recordings is me. So, which might not always be the best, but
Mhm.
now I don't have to deal with copyright.
Right.
So,
And it's kind of like
yeah,
writing. If you don't write emotional scenes, eventually that's going to come up. So you have to figure out how to do it.
gotta find how to do it. Yeah.
So are
So,
any of these other characters special to you, other than the one that had the same eyesight issue as your dad, or any of the other ones special?
absolutely. And I hope you'd say that about your characters, and most writers about them, because for me, when I write, I create these characters. They
Mm-hmm.
become real. That sounds
Right.
really bizarre,
No,
but
I totally get that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
think
real
it
people in
sounds,
my head.
yes, I think it doesn't sound bizarre to writers, but to
Mm-hmm.
like other people in my neighborhood, or
Right.
whatever, I tell,
You're like
like it sounds like,
psychologist or something.
yeah, they're like, wait a minute, Kyle's making up people and he's an adult, what's
No,
going on?
I think
But
every writer understands that to the writers they are well, and sometimes even the readers, they are real people in their real
that,
universes.
that's a great point. If they can't be real to me, then
Mm-hmm.
how could I ever hope that they would be real to someone reading to a reader? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep.
So the answer is yes. All of my main characters are dear to me, and actually that's one of the worst. I don't know about you, Deb, but when I finish, it's bittersweet. It's like, look at what I did
Mm-hmm.
when I'm finishing my draft and I type the end. But at the same time, I no longer get to spend time with those characters in my
Mm-hmm.
mind that I just went through ups and downs with.
Yep.
You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
bittersweet to me.
It is bittersweet. And usually at the end, I can look back and say, I wish I had done a better job by you. I'm never satisfied.
Yeah, that's a funny idea.
So, any tips for any aspiring writers to how to create their worlds, make them believable?
I think a lot of what we just talked about, write for yourself. You know, I'm not knocking people that write to market. That's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing. I won't say trend. I think it's just, you know, that might
It's a way
set
of
what.
living. People got to make money.
Yes, that's a real thing. But I don't think that's exclusive of one. Okay, so you've decided what type of book you want to write. Now, who are you writing? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening? And to make it so that you're writing for yourself. Um, and I think it goes back in my mind, that is the reason why is exactly what we just said about if I can't write characters or conflict or
Mm-hmm.
a scene that I can't connect with, how could I ever hope someone else would?
Yes, 100%. I
You
agree with
know,
that.
so in the end of the day, you gotta write for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in my
Even if
opinion.
that means deleting the 1,200 words you just deleted and rewriting them,
Oh,
you have to write it so you connect with it.
that's painful, isn't it?
I know. It sucks so
Okay,
bad.
so okay, real question now. Now
Uh-huh.
you write differently than me, especially if it's you know on your Twitch feed or
Mm-hmm.
channel. Do you actually delete those 1,200 or do you just like move them to the end in case you need to come back to it later and pull it back in?
It depends on how bad it is. I don't usually delete it till the end of the session or even the next day when I'm reading and going, what is this crap?
Hmm.
It is painful when it happens, but if there's like a little glimmer, like a couple sentences, I might save those. But sometimes it just has to be deleted because you know as the writer that there is something wrong here. It is not flowing. It's not connecting like we were just talking about. Like it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work usually is because maybe something that you wrote, like it just went down the wrong path, basically, is how I always
Yeah.
view it. Is
Do
that there
you
was a fork
typically
in the road and you took the wrong version. You need to go back and do it over again.
do you typically find do you typically know you're doing that while you're writing, or is it when you go back
Hmm.
and read it later?
I can kind of get the idea when I'm writing because it feels like I'm just like pulling the words out and I don't like it and I don't
Yeah,
like the way it's going and I'm unhappy with it. And then at the end, I'm just like, yeah, this doesn't work and just delete.
100%.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it sucks so bad.
it
But
does.
in
Especially
the
if you keep
end, the new
going,
one is yes. The point is you have to nip
right?
it in the bud. I did
Yeah.
that. I have this novel I'm on again, off again working with, and I have no joke rewritten this thing 4 times.
The whole novel?
I usually get to like 3/4 of the way through, and I'm just like, no, this isn't working. That this isn't saying
Ooh,
what I need to say. Like, it's a pet peeve,
ooh,
and I will probably never publish this thing. But every once in a
yeah,
while, I pick it back up, and I'm trying to like. Right now, I'm trying to do like a heavy duty outline to like
yeah,
try to rein it in. But yeah, if it's not going the right direction, you know it. And that usually means
absolutely.
something in the past happened and you didn't realize it. So you have to nip it in the bud before you get three
Oh,
quarters of the way through the novel.
oh, you're saying even further down the road, you keep going,
Yep. If I
even
didn't
though,
realize that that was the wrong,
oh,
like if I
yeah,
didn't,
that's a,
if I just tried to keep pressing on, like just to get going, just to keep doing it,
yeah,
that's the wrong move for me. Like it just
yes,
months wasted basically.
yeah,
I do save
yeah,
those.
that's
I
a
don't
tough
delete
one.
those. I save them as like draft one and move on to another one.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to interviews with songwriters? I listen quite a bit, and they oftentimes they're asked about like their most popular song.
Mm-hmm.
And I find more often than not, they're like, oh, I wrote that one in like 20, 30 minutes. Like it just
Right.
comes, you know what I
Happens.
mean?
Yeah.
And that happens with writers, doesn't it? Like, not
I
to say
feel,
you're going to write a whole novel that way, but like you just are in like the zone and you're connected to whatever
yep.
creativity wise. And it
It's
just
usually your
is
best
zapped
work. And
into
I
you.
don't understand. Like I have
Yes.
short stories that I have just written in like just in a snap. And just like sometimes I go back and like, that was my best work. Like I did a really good job on that. And I did it in like 2 hours. You know, like why can't the rest of my writing be like that?
So I will not move on to another chapter until I feel content with the last one. And I never really thought why, but now I think you just verbalized why.
Yeah,
you know,
it's got to
for
feel
the
right. I don't
longest
know.
time, oh, totally. For the longest time, actually, with my first series, I would not write if I didn't feel inspired to write. But I think as my kids have grown up and it's like, okay, I have that hour.
Right.
I need to use it. I find myself doing that, but I won't move on to the next chapter until that last chapter feels right.
Right. You can't move on if you don't know where you've been. And you got to make sure where you've been is the correct path. I always view it like a trail in the woods. Like there's just paths you can take off of it. Like that's just how I mentally picture it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always view it as taking a different path and sometimes you just have to backtrack until you feel like where it went off track and then start over from there. And you know what? It's always better.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so I'm an avid hiker, so there's metaphors all over the place there. But I think we should do a PSA. If you are hiking, have a map with you. So you know.
And a compass. Please have a compass.
Yes. Yes. And a phone and lots of other things.
And a phone and extra water and protein bars. Yes. This is kind of why I don't like do long trail hiking.
Okay, so on that metaphor, have a map with you. So it's the quintessential question a lot of us writers get asked is
plotter or pantser?
Yep. What do you do?
I am a plotter. I plot things out. I just got a new program I'm using that I'm really liking. It's called Plotter, but it doesn't have the E in the end of the name. Anyways, I'm visual. I'm very visual, and it has a visual timeline where I can move cards around and have my your sub arcs, like your romance, your self-discovery, the past. They all can be in different lines, and then you map it out by chapters. And that's very helpful to me. Like if I feel like the romance subplot isn't working, then usually I can go back and look and see, oh, well, something hasn't happened in this subplot for a while. Like maybe I should bring in the romance in this chapter, and then it usually flows better. So yes, I'm a plotter. I plot out the highlights of the chapter. Like I don't do knit by knit for the chapter, and I kind of pants the chapter, I guess, is the best way to put that. I give myself goals. I know where it needs to start. I know the points I need to hit, but I don't do everything in between that.
Yeah. Okay. It's cool to hear there's tools like that out there for people to be able to.
I actually found that out through one of these interviews with another author. Tara Lush, she does cozy mysteries. I feel like I've been talking about that a lot. But yeah, she turned me onto it, and I tried it out, and it really works for me. Like I said, I'm visual, so it really helps that out.
Yeah. Huh. Cool.
So much that I've taken the novel I keep putting down and picking up, and I'm starting to transcode that into my outline and see like, where's the problem with this thing?
Where is this? Yeah. I don't know. I let my emotions lead the way. If I want to write something that ends in a beautiful, uplifting, how am I going to get there? And it's cool to hear that there's tools like that. I could see where they'd be useful, but I just don't think I would.
It's personal preference.
Yeah, completely. Everybody has a different way. But.
So I take it you're more pantser?
I plot out so obviously I need to know where the beginning is because I'm intrigued by an idea enough to start there.
And when you say beginning, you mean beginning of the novel, beginning of the story?
Yes, like point A, right? Point A. And then I have where I would like to end up at point Z, and that's the reason I'm writing it, right? And then in my mind, I'll have kind of plot G and T and Q, or
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Right.
But to me, the most rewarding is when, as I'm writing, I surprise myself. Like I sat down thinking, okay, I'm writing this because it's what I
Mm-hmm.
thought I would write all day. And then as I'm writing, it completely goes in a different way, in a
Mm-hmm.
better way than I ever expected. And
Those are great, except when they don't fit
those
into
are
my outline.
the best. That's why I don't have a huge outline. And I've changed endings because of that too.
Yeah. That's really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. Um, man, those moments are those are the
It's
best.
like gold. It's
Those are the
like you
best.
didn't realize, but have you ever had that happen where something like that changes? Like, wait, but that fits into this thing I did 4 chapters ago, and you don't
Exactly.
even realize it's happening until it has happened.
As you're
You're
putting
like,
the
I'm a
words on the
genius,
page.
right?
Yes. Yes. No one else may understand it, and it may seem so easy to everyone else and
Mm-hmm.
obvious, but that's the beauty in it, and how you came up with that. I don't know. Those are the moments to write for.
Yeah. Sometimes I swear it's mostly subconscious. Like I
Yeah.
don't. You're not doing it. At least I don't. At least for me, I'm not doing it on purpose. But then that suddenly fits in so well with something that's in chapter 2, and I'm working in the 20s. It's like, wow, I didn't even plan for that to happen, and it's perfect,
Right.
serendipitous.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Those are the best.
All right, we are getting close to our hour, so we should probably close
Yeah.
this up.
Yeah.
Quickly before we go, if you could give a piece of advice to your younger writing self, what would it be?
Oh, I would say probably that's tough because I don't. Um,
Well, the follow up to that, if it helps you answer the question, is, and then how does that help you with your writing today?
oh, okay. Um, my advice. I mean, there's a whole business aspect to this, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of not even touching on. Um,
Yes, writing has
and
a deep iceberg underbelly.
right, yes, that's a great analogy. Um, so in still trying to avoid that topic, I guess. um, in terms of the creative process, I would say I wish earlier on I recognized why I started writing,
Mm-hmm.
and that would, like I said before, to escape. Now, doesn't mean I'm escaping anything bad. That's absolutely not
Mm-hmm.
it. I see it as a yin to yang in lifestyle of I work hard during the day at my day job,
Mm-hmm.
and then that allows me wanting to be creative
Mm-hmm.
later. And if I didn't have that outlet to be creative, would I still enjoy my day job work just as hard? There's
Right.
that yin yang kind of,
Mm-hmm. Or would the stress just
and
build up and so you wouldn't have an outlet? And I agree, I understand that.
yeah. And I just kind of wish I had recognized that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think it would have changed anything. It probably would have just been good for me to recognize
Right.
earlier. And yeah, because in terms of like story and everything, I'm really happy with the way all my books turned out.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of essential. Which kid is your favorite?
Right.
And your kids don't believe you when you say, no, really, I don't have a favorite.
Right.
Right? It's the same thing with my novels. I love them all, and for different reasons. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it would be more that self reflection of why I
To help you
write.
maybe enjoy it more or take more pleasure in it.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
I
Yeah.
can understand that. I mean, I well, I don't know. I guess I write for pleasure, but I definitely read for that same reason. Like I read to escape if I have time to read. Um
Yeah.
I'm less of a TV watcher and more of a reader, and that is
Mm.
100% why I read. I read to escape life. And that's not saying I have a bad life. I have a very
Yeah.
wonderful, privileged life, but it's just like a brain break. You need to do
Yeah.
something else.
I agree completely. Yes. You're not trying to escape anything bad. It's
Right.
just
It's like a
an
vacation,
outlet.
a little mental vacation.
and one in a location that you get to make up,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Why have we not written books in Hawaii yet? I don't know. Or maybe you have. I don't know. I haven't.
I have not, and that's probably because I have not been to Hawaii. But yes, I can't write places like that. Like all my books take place in places that I am intimately familiar with. I can't write places that I haven't been to.
Are they real places?
Yes.
I mean, not like fantasy worlds, magic.
Yeah.
Like, are they?
They're real actual places, and sometimes I walk a very fine line. I don't want it to be actually real places. Like I don't want someone to come back and say, "Hey, you talked about me in this story." I'm like, no, I made it up. But they are real places, like the places I have lived, the way I know it smells in the summer and in the winter, stuff like that. Just the intimacy of being in a place and knowing what it's like.
Okay, so I know we're running out of time, but now I'm curious. Give me some of those locations, like cities, whatnot.
I was just talking about the place where my grandparents lived. It's a hill in rural Pennsylvania. I spent the first 7 years of my life living there with them. So I know this hill like the back of my hand. Like I know the stream, I know the trees, the rocks, the way the light looks when it's coming down to the trees, the way it's a dirt road, so the way it feels under your feet. And like the one I'm outlining right now takes place in a place a little bit north from me. Again, rural. I don't know why. Apparently, I'm concentrating on rural right now. But I know what it's like in November, like it is right now. Like I know the way it smells. I know the way the fog looks in the sunlight. It's just those weird little intimate details that you might take for granted. I try to interject into the story and try to make it real for the reader as well.
I love that. It leads in, if I could just for a couple minutes, to this interesting experience that happened to me when writing one of my books. So my romance books, again, each one is in a different city too. And they're normally cities of places I've traveled to. They're Portland, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Atlanta. Oh my gosh, one just escaped me. LA, LA. But I knew I wanted to write a love story about my main character finding love in New York City. I, though, have never been to New York City, okay? And as I'm preparing to write this novel, and right before I started, I happened to be on a plane from like the East Coast to where I live in Utah, okay? And it came up with the lady next to me that I'm an author, and I was telling her my next novel is going to be New York, but I'd never been there. And it just so happened she was a native New Yorker, and we had a long flight, and I quizzed her for like 4 hours on everything I thought. And it was so awesome. I was like, this has got to be more than coincidence. Because I had no idea where to even start with the feel of the place or the breakout of different locations there. And she filled me in on everything. I never got her name. I wish I did, so I could think her right now. But anyways.
Thank you, mysterious lady on the plane.
That's right. And thank you, Deb, for having me on. I appreciate it.
You were a wonderful guest. I loved having you on.
It's great to hear another writer's
I know. It's so nice to talk to peers who understand that you have crazy stories in your head and people are real and they're not made up.
And we're still normal through that, right?
Yes. We're still normal humans. We still pick up our kids from school and do the grocery shopping. Read and Write Podcast is edited and produced by Deborah Z. Barth. Music was provided by Lofi Girl and can be found at lofigirl.com or on their YouTube channel. Audio effects were created by Red Octopus and Black River Phonogram. Show notes and previous episodes can be found at readandwritepodcast.com.